Hello, and welcome to As the CMMC Churns. I'm Matt Titcomb from Peak InfoSec, an authorized C3PO. I'm also a CMMC Provisional Assessor, Certified Assessor, and Curriculum Developer. Well, we're going to talk about NIST 800-171 Rev 3 draft that, just came out last week, and the inability and the interesting math that the federal agencies follow in creating NIST. So, and this is really the case with some of the weird math is 1 minus 1 equals 3. Yeah, really. Math guy kind of made my head explode a little bit. But first and foremost, I really do want to give kudos to Ron Ross and Vicki Pilliteri. They're the leaders, the brains behind this. I may be picking on them for their math, but they did an exceptional job with 800-171 Rev 3 overall. I think they struck the right balance between the new moderate baseline and figuring out what was appropriate in risk acceptance for the federal government for us in the commercial sector to handle their intellectual property. So again, kudos to Ron, kudos to Victoria, great job. We really do like 800-171. Your math skills, well, okay. But before we go any further, I want to make sure everybody else kind of thinks through this. So what should you all be doing as an OSC? First and foremost, ignore everything going on in the ecosystem right now. Even just before recording this, I'm seeing, panic drama. A lot of FUD. I mean, it is FUD storm, like, end of all FUD storms going on. Ignore it, okay? Let me hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, foot stomp. Ignore it, all right? Second thing you do, add a risk registry item to monitor NIST 800-170 Rev 3 for impacts to your system compliance. You got plenty of time for this. This is going to be a multi-year effort, so don't panic, okay? Third, focus on getting NIST 800-171 Rev 2 implemented and include the non-federal organization controls. Last, stop watching this video. You've got work to go do. Seriously. Watching the rest of this video, it's all going to change. We don't know what's going to really happen. I'm giving a summary, so if you want to watch, great, but realistically, you're better off spend your time working on 800-171 Rev 2. You still there? All right. Well, I'm going to presume that you want to go ahead and watch the rest of this. So let's talk about the federal math. Oy vey. So they provided an Excel spreadsheet with just kind of the summary and some metrics, and they did some math counting on it. So, granted, back underneath 800-171 Rev 2, we started with 100 original requirements. Well, the simple reality is, when they did this, they kind of went through these and said, yeah, there's 18 with no significant change, 49 with significant change, 18 with minor change, and then 26 new requirements. All right. And then 27 requirements withdrawn. That equaled, wait a minute, hang on. They added here, just to be really clear, added. And that's how they came up with 138 requirements in Rev 3. Yeah, 138. That's not reality. Reality is there's actually, if you manually count the actual requirements that you've got to comply to. Now, they do keep the reference to the ones that are withdrawn, so it's kind of where I get that they've got 138, but they don't. The real reality is you've got 111. So, okay. And they do the same thing with NIST 853 Rev 4 to Rev 5. When requirements were withdrawn or consolidated, they kept the old one as a pointer to the new one. I get it, but that's not a requirement. Okay. So let's talk what really happened in the real math behind this. And this is now backed by Excel because, I don't necessarily trust myself manually counting through Excel spreadsheets and convoluting and figuring this out. So we started with the original 110 requirements. They did add 26 new requirements. Most of these came from the NFOs, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So we're now up to 136 requirements. Holy crap. Yep, that's kind of where it got started from. Now, they really did truly remove 5. Voice over IP is a good example of this one, where they did remove it. So we're now down to 131. And they took 22 requirements and merged them into others. Now, for example, a good example is 3116 wireless access. So all of the related wireless access controls and from access control domain all got merged into here. That's where you see kind of that other requirements that are withdrawn that aren't requirements because they're really up there. Yeah. Now we're 209. Now, when you look at what they've done, and this is where they kind of did some confusion amongst themselves, they have 2 requirements that got moved to other domains. So suddenly, again, we went from 14 to 17 domains to match, 853. Goodness in that, no problems. They lost track of the fact that in reality, these 2 were not deleted. They're actually 2 entries in their spreadsheet. So it's kind of confusing. I kind of get why they did it, probably for traceability points. But in doing math and numbers and tracking, yeah, it didn't come up right. So this is where we really do get the 111 requirements. Now again, that 111 requirements, from those of us coming from Rev 2, if you ever start in a perfect world of Rev 3 and some reason you're going back and watching this video, well, those of us, we're going to think of this as the 133 requirements. Because in reality, there's the 111 that are in there, plus the 22 that got merged and consolidated. Yeah, 133. Just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. They're really not that hard, and if you're already doing them under Rev 2, it's more of a shuffle and rearrangement of the deck. So, again, this is real math backed by Excel. Now, let's talk about what they did in getting to those numbers. So in Rev 2, if you go all the way back to the back of the book, there's the tailoring section of all of the requirements that are in 853 moderate baseline from Rev 4. They broke them into these categories. The 48% that were of that grouping, that is the definition of the ones that are the 110 requirements. Now, there was a lot of complaining, squawking, and discussions around NFOs, the non-federal organization controls. And there was also a realization by NIST and the federal government that they assumed, and you can understand exactly what I mean by the word assumed, that organizations were doing that. Well, all of the audits and things that DOD did and all of the social realities of people talking about it came to the reality of they weren't doing them. So suddenly, NIST had to kind of undo that assumption and relook at it. Well, the net effect here was that suddenly NFOs went from being one of the biggest here, whoops, where'd my little laser pointer go? Of 23% to now you're down to 6%. Federal remained the same. NCOs increased. They did move a couple into NCOs, but there's also some more that they basically shoved, again, you are fully responsible for the NCOs. You're expected to be doing them, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, backups, data protection, disaster recovery, all that. That's in the NCOs. So that's fully risk transfer to you guys. The non-applicable is a new category. Now this covers things that are duplicative. So within 853 Rev 5, there is the privacy controls. Those privacy controls don't apply in the context of federal CUI because PII is a category of CUI, which would imply in all the controls and the requirements all fall underneath that category there. So that's basically how they shuffled everything around. Reality is, a lot of the new requirements came over from the NFOs. So, and yes, policies and procedures are now a formal requirement that you have to do. Yeah, so it's just the way they did it. Makes sense. I'm not complaining. I think I owe Fernando Machado a Diet Coke or something because I think he won the bet. Now, they did introduce formally within 800.171 Rev 3 draft organization defined parameters. We warned everybody this was coming. If you've watched our videos over time, we've talked about this in context of Rev 2. We've discussed this in context of other things that you have to do. Now, there are really, the purpose of this is to customize the requirement based on organizational protection needs. So this allows flexibility within what is really a prescriptive framework, but allows some wiggle room within that framework based on operational requirements. Now, there are two types of ODPs, well, two subtypes, to be honest, of that ODP. You have the selection, you have a choice of approach. So picking on media use here, you can see the selection is to either restrict or prohibit. That's a choice that the organization gets to make. And then based on that choice, you get to define what that removable system media is. Now, it's interesting, that selection can actually be combinations. You can choose to restrict such and such, but then generally prohibit. Again, there's a lot of nuanced ways to play with this, and there's a lot of potential problems with this that a lot of people are kind of squawking about, but that's okay. This will get worked through. Now, once those values are specified, they do become a part of the requirement. So we can look in 800.172 alpha and 853 alpha. You will see that the specification of the ODP is now an assessment objective. So good things to be looking at, good way to look at things going forward and be planning for in your policies and procedures. But I wouldn't jump too fast into this one. Now, the real problem that everybody's squawking about, and it's appropriate, it's just the federal government can be the federal government, is fundamentally that customization, the first right of refusal is the federal government. The federal government gets to specify to restrict or prohibit, provide guidance, or just simply say, you figure it out, OSC, we're going to trust you to do this. We're always obviously paranoid about the federal government overreacting and overcomplicating and overregulating. This is a potential area where we could see overregulation. It just kind of is, but it's just something to be concerned about and something to monitor, and ways that we can potentially, as we look to this in the future, take proactive ways to help to guide DoD in this for how it operate within the defense industrial base. Now, the ginormous impact award goes to the new requirement, 312.5 independent assessment. This is a truly new requirement coming out of 853 Rev 5. This requirement requires independent assessors or assessment teams to assess controls. I think this one actually needs an ODP, in all honesty. But the simple reality is, this requirement is going to require third-party assessment, or organizations within that organization has absolutely no financial dependency or anything on this. It's going to be really hard intra-organization to try and say that you've achieved a true and honest independent assessment. The reason I'm saying that, and we really go big, we've done work for the 3 lines of defense for the major financial institutions. The internal assessment by the CIO, CISO's team, that's the first line of defense. Second line of defense is an independent assessment organization that then comes in and assesses it within the organization. Now, we're talking major financial banks. I mean, you're talking the ones that are quote-unquote too big to fail. The third line of defense is third-party independent assessments. Even they recognize you need to have a third party come in to validate that your own internal people are actually telling you the truth. I kind of get the feeling, it's going to be really hard for you to be able to justify this as an organization without having a C3PO or some other organization come in and do a third-party independent assessment of your controls. So this has huge consequences, not only for DoD, universities, for example. Department of Education determined Financial aid applications that are submitted to them are considered CUI when completed and submitted. Oops. FEMA declared that insurance applications for FEMA insurance claims, when filled in and completed, are CUI. Oops. Yeah. So you can start seeing the implications of this, of going, if you're truly going to be protecting the federal government's intellectual property, get ready in whatever organization you're doing supporting the federal government for third-party assessments of that part of your business. So let's sum up. Kudos again to Ron Ross and Vicky Pilliteri, who should not be doing and be trusted to do public math. I'm sorry to say, yeah, didn't do good. But again, kudos. We really do like 800-171 Rev 3. The draft looks great. We've got comments. We'll be providing comments as a part of this, and we'll probably do a churns on the comments. So if you are an OSC, go get Rev 3 done in NFOs. Just go get it done. There are 111 requirements for Rev 3. Mostly the 26 are from the NFOs, while consolidating 22. So in reality, yeah, you've got 133 requirements you've really got to get done. Now, there's a lot of more nuance in Rev 3, so it's probably even more detailed than that when it's going to come down to it. ODPs are here to stay, and the federal agency has the first say on what those are going to be for you. And lastly, 312.5 has huge consequences for all federal contractors and organizations. So just be cognizant of that, and we'll continue to monitor that as we go forward. Again, thank you for joining us for a special edition of As the CMMC Churns, and we'll see you next time.